All right, guys. Well, we are here on Facebook Live. This is our talkback session where we talk about tonight or today's sermon a little bit earlier and just recoup it. And so we are it's just the two of us, it's the two originals, Gary and Darren, here talking to you tonight about Gary's sermon that just went on. And hopefully you saw it earlier today. If you didn't, you can go to our website, ssbc.org, and see the sermon there, or our YouTube or Facebook channel, SSBC Jacks, for both of them, and see them there as well. And so, Gary, this was a little bit fun for you because you had enough time to forget the sermon. You recorded the sermon about 3 weeks ago. So how was it watching yourself back?
Well, my hair was long. It was before haircuts were legal. So that's one thing. But no, it's always, I think this message is one of those messages I was super excited about, just because I think it's so, it makes the first century church become more real when we realize that what we're going through and the similarities of how we have to do church now, of course, minus technology and all that, but the fact that, there are no buildings to meet in, and the fact that, it's not easy to get together and maybe even impossible. There is something about that echoes back of the first century church when they couldn't rely on buildings, they couldn't rely on programs. And so they were living it out in their homes, and that sort of pressure, that persecution, I think it's good for the church. And I think it really refines the church and gets us back to our roots and what's really important. And there's a lot of loss involved in times like this. Some of that loss is lost because it really wasn't useful anyway. It's like wood, hay, and stubble that's burned away. And other loss is sacrificing for the cause, like Stephen's death. So we're kind of going through one of those periods of time right now, and I think it's really good for us to recognize that and to look at that first century church, and then what Paul's words to the Corinthians were about, hey, how you build your faith. An enduring faith is a faith that is true. Whereas, if a faith gets tested by a trial like what we're going through and it falls apart, it was probably never a genuine faith to begin with. We don't really talk enough about that, I don't think. So I was excited about that message.
Yeah, it's always interesting talking about the first century church, because I feel like in my college years, which, as Brian already pointed out, was forever ago because I'm old. But in my college years, like, it's when, Erwin McManus and Francis Chan, these guys out in California, were talking about, if we could just return to the first century church. And I feel like it's been said so much now, it's kind of like a trope more than anything else. But what do you feel? In your sermon, you said something about, in chapter 7, they were like refusing to go out until that persecution. And chapter 8 in Acts is really them kind of going out and God kind of forcing them out. What do you think of the American church? What do you think that we have become kind of resistant against changing? What things have we become resistant against?
Yeah, I think we've become resistant against a lot of things. We've gotten super comfortable, with our buildings and our gymnasiums and our air conditioning and our technology, and it's a very consumer-driven culture, and that is reflected in the church as well. Very consumer-driven church in many cases. And I think what we're going through is a reminder of our need to depend on the foundation, which is Christ, and the basics of the gospel, which is, sharing the good news and discipling people one-on-one. And so much like in Acts, that Jesus told them in Acts 1:8, and it wasn't until Acts 8:1 that they did it. And in between there came a lot of persecution. They were forced out of their comfort zone. And I think in some ways, COVID-19 is forcing the church out of its comfort zone. We would have never, ever shut down the church for 10 weeks. We wouldn't have done that. I mean, I could imagine, because I've preached this before. I've preached about, the church not being about the building. And nothing that we've said has been new. I've been saying it, for a long time, since I've been at Southside. But if I had gone in and said, hey guys, to demonstrate this, let's go ahead and close the church down for 10 weeks. And I want to do this whole sermon series virtually. I mean, I might not have had a job, but here, God kind of teed it up for us. And again, I don't want to make light of the hardships and I mean, it's real. I'm not trying to diminish that but I do think it's important for us to recognize God's hand in the midst of this, and how it could be, not could be, it is God's way of trying to get the church's attention and push us out of Jerusalem into Judea and Samaria and ultimately to the ends of the earth. So yeah, I think we're really hyper dependent on our buildings. We're hyper dependent on programs. We're hyper dependent on paid staff. That's another thing that hasn't necessarily been able to be dependent on. We want to pay people to disciple us and pay people to disciple our kids, and we want, and in reality, we don't do some of the work ourselves in the church. And when I say this, I'm not, Southside's a great church, and so I don't want to. I'm talking about capital C church here, and I think some of this we can learn from at Southside as well. But I mean, for example, I was at churches, and I'm sure you have been too, where the congregation's job was to show up and to give money. If you show up and you give money and maybe you volunteer and serve in a couple places, leave the ministry, leave the discipling to the professionals. That's why we went to school. And I think that's a dangerous precedent that was established. And hopefully COVID-19 has kind of dislodged that maybe. Maybe it's changed some of those things.
Yeah, during your sermon, I remembered an analogy, or I just thought of an analogy. Brandy, when she was studying for PT for a doctorate, one of the things was like, when you become old, why do you become old? Or what does it mean to become old? And really, it's less about age as much as it is about your cells not multiplying as much, or your ability to rebound isn't there at a cellular level. And that just hit me because you mentioned the age of the church. I mean, we're at an 80-year-old church. But in a lot of ways, we've shown ourselves to be a very young church in the midst of COVID. And the fact that it was Southside itself, we were able to rebound and respond very quickly. And I think that's where, some church ideas to where just because the church was age-wise old, a lot of times you would hear in some church circles that meant that church needs to prepare for the end of its life. However, that's really a bad representation of a church. It's how well does your church, young or old in terms of how long it's been established, how well is it able to respond? And so that's where I just got that image of the cellular level, how quickly were our cells, our individual family units, our individual small group units, able to respond to this and to react to it, not in a negative way, but to, charge hell with a water pistol. And I really feel like our people were able to do that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that's a great point. The average church in America, the average lifespan for a church in America is 70 years. So, when you think about that, you think about sort of where we are as a church. If a church, then that would mean if a church doesn't begin to reinvent itself, then it's going to die. Pardon me, that's Chester. Chester is letting himself be known tonight. But that church will die if it doesn't adapt. I definitely think COVID-19 is sort of exacerbating that. It is accelerating that in some cases. And I don't know whether it's true or not, the statistic, and we won't really know till it's all over. But they're saying 20% of churches in America may not make it through all this, and that's sad. I find that really sad. But I also know that many of those churches aren't healthy already. And, Jesus said that an unproductive branch would get cut away so that it could produce more fruit, that you could cut it back to where it's healthy. So I think that's happening in the church right now. It's happening in our families to some extent, as well, as we just recognize and know that hardships, trials, the pressure of trials really tests us, and it causes us to lose or to move away from things that are broken and dead already. You have to sweep them away. They get burned up by the trial. And I think that's where we all are, whether it's our personal life, what in my life really isn't working right now. And the truth is, COVID-19 may be revealing that. It didn't make the problem. Like if your marriage is in distress because you guys are together during quarantine, the truth is COVID-19 didn't create your marriage problems. Your marriage had problems that COVID-19 revealed. And I think that's true in every aspect of our life. And if you figured out during COVID-19 that your boss is a jerk, your boss was probably a jerk already. I mean, these things are just, it has a way of, the pressure has a way of bringing the problems to the surface. But the good thing about that is if you respond and you cooperate with the Holy Spirit and deal with those issues, you can come out on the other end with a stronger faith, a stronger marriage, a stronger, if you say, oh, now I see there's a weak spot in my relationship with my kids, or there's a weak spot in my work ethic, then if you can identify it in the storm, then when the storm passes, you can shore that up and you'll be better prepared for the next storm.
Yeah, and I think something you said, if you would have done this without COVID happening, right? If we would have said, hey, let's shut down the church for 10 weeks and just see what happens. What I think is interesting about the situation we're in now versus what would have happened then is some people, I feel like, would have chosen to not go along with the church because of that, and would instead have filtered to another church that would have given them what they wanted, which is an in-person, that same type of experience. So it's almost, and those people have had to adapt and address it. And I'll just say about our members, y'all have done a fantastic job at being here and being present in the midst of all this. But my point is, like, I think there's something here to where, as you're talking about with, the light is being revealed on these issues, that if we would have not had such a wide ranging shutdown in all of our lives that are highlighting a lot of aspects in our lives, I'm sure we would have found a way to kind of deaden some of this. As a church, we would have found a way to kind of look past it. Other people would have chosen maybe to go to another church instead of actually dealing with some of these things that we had to deal with. And so I think that there's just some encouragement there as saying, hey, this has been a really good time where we haven't been allowed to run from our problems. And we have got to take the time then to address them head on as is.
Yeah,
and so, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly right. And it's a good observation, because I mean, if we all knew that we could go to a different part of the country and escape, the hardships and just kind of do normal life there, we would go there and then come back. It's the difference between a hurricane and a pandemic. First of all, the hurricane is short, comparatively speaking, and you can leave. Like, you just go somewhere where the hurricane isn't. And so, but the truth is, like, you can't move your house, you can't move your stuff. And so when you come back, you find out what was strong enough to withstand the hurricane. Yeah. And then you have to clear away all the broken pieces and rebuild. But what was strong enough to stand the storm, you can be sure that is the most dependable, reliable, those are the most dependable and reliable structures. And I think COVID-19 is going to do that. It's going to show what about our church is strong, what about our church is dependable, and honestly, a lot about our church is strong. I mean, this has revealed a lot of really, I think, strengths of our church that I knew but didn't really maybe appreciate as much. But then also, I think, where were their weaknesses, and what do we need to do to address those? So yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great analogy. And you're right. We would try to escape it if we could.
So, and I love the hurricane and the pandemic analogy, because it's thinking, here in Florida, we get so used to hurricanes, but, and then I've tried to run away from a hurricane just to find out that the hurricane moved towards where you are, and then you run away another direction. But we weren't able to really run away here. And so I guess for you, and I have my answer, I'll say it after you, but kind of for you, what is kind of one takeaway where, in the sermon, again, I think you said something about, learning, and you take what you've learned in the midst of it with you after the fact. So for you personally, and I'll kind of share for me personally too, what do you think the top thing is that you'll probably take with you where you've grown as an individual or your family's grown? It's kind of all up in the air for you personally, but where have you kind of grown through this?
Well, I think for me personally, it's just been a reminder of how the preciousness and the value of being with my family. and just knowing that the church is going to be fine. And the church has not only survived, it's thrived during this. And so, maybe not worry so much about trying to do what Jesus already said he would do, which is build his church, and instead focus a little bit more. My kids are getting older, so my time with them is limited. And so focusing more on them, focusing more on time at home, and not necessarily worrying so much about how the church will endure or survive, because that's not really my job. And so I think that's probably been my biggest personal takeaway during this time. And take a little more time. The pace, this slower pace has been really good for me, because it has forced me to be bored. I don't remember the last time I was bored. I've been bored a few times. I'm like, that's a good feeling. We need to be bored. That's when creativity comes. That's when so many good things happen. And so the downside is I'm beginning of the year at Christmas, right before Christmas, I decided I was going to get off social media. So I was off social media all the way until COVID. And now it's like I live, everything's back on it again. So I do have more screen time than I want, but that's just, I think, true for everybody.
Yeah, I think for me, again, with that family idea, I think it's Brandon and I talking through things in the midst of this has been really good. And there were conversations where if it wouldn't have been for COVID, I don't think any of our, tough things that we've come across as a couple were like pre-COVID, and we just didn't deal with it. What I think was different here is we were forced to deal with issues quicker than we normally would have if we would have had distractions. So it's not like it dug up some stuff that existed previously, as much as it's, a situation would emerge or a disagreement would emerge, and we'd have to tackle it sooner, because we couldn't just say, well, let's get in the car and let's just go somewhere else and, ignore it.
Each other. There's no way to hide from one another.
Yeah. So you just gotta deal with it. And I think that is something that, I hope we take with us after the fact. And, again, going back to the hurricane example you said earlier, I think there are principles where if we can listen and we can think through, okay, what do we think we learned in the midst of this? It'll kind of be like those times where if you grew up in Florida, you just remember the hurricane vacations that would occur in school, or the hurricane vacations that would occur with your family. And I just always remember I learned how to play gin rummy from hurricane vacations with my mom. She would teach me gin rummy at candlelight because the power was out with hurricanes. And so, if we can take that time just to think about it right before the world opens up, which it is right now, I think we can actually apply these things to our lives, and that would be good. And we can always remember them.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And because I do think there are things we've learned. It's not just that the storm reveals the weakness in the foundation. The storm also points out where the strong points are. And for us, like realizing through the course of this that we upped our game with our ministry to our senior adults and our homebound folks. We're doing things now that I'm thinking, why weren't we already doing that? Like, why didn't we do that before? Why did it take COVID-19 for us to do some of these simple things? And now I'm thinking, well, that's great, because we'll keep doing this after COVID-19, because those individuals weren't coming to church. Their pandemic started the day their doctor or family said, you can't drive anymore. You have to stay home. And so they've been under quarantine for a long time. So like all the technology that we've done and the way we've made church accessible at home or in hospitals. I was texting today with our friend Alicia McLean, and she was with Mark in rehab, and they were at church together, this morning. And I'm thinking, man, that's awesome. It's awesome as they go through this difficult thing for them to experience church together and have that moment together. But that's all stuff that we could have done before, but just really didn't focus on. And now that we've been forced to focus on it, we will continue to focus on it, because there are always going to be people who are sheltering in place for all kinds of reasons, not just a pandemic.
Yeah. And for us, it's such a large grouping of our church. It is a large just segment of our population. And it's the truth that it can happen at any point. Somebody, because we've had this with our members, to where they have to move all of a sudden and take care of one of their older family members that they didn't think about, or somebody has something happen to them and they didn't plan on it. And so it's so important for us just to recognize that need's there. So we thank you guys for watching with us. We didn't want to belabor our time. We know it's a holiday weekend, but we did want to kind of turn the attention towards reopening and just give another plug to everything that's going on, so you can hear it one more time from us, just so you know exactly what's going to happen. So we will be reopening officially this Wednesday, and starting at 6:30 p.m. We will be here on campus. And Gary, if you just want to give us a vision for the church as a whole during reopening, we'll just kind of bounce around with what's going to happen.
Sure. Yeah, it's a pretty simple thing. We want to be sure to follow all the best recommended practices from the CDC and our state and local government. So we are, we've been working on this for a while. We're not the first church in Jacksonville to reopen. We took a little bit longer because of the demographic of our church, recognizing that a good majority of our population falls into the category of some pre-existing conditions, or they've got, their age puts them in that category. So we wanted to just be very, very prayerful and thoughtful about it. So Wednesdays at 6:30, Sunday mornings at 10:30, same service, fellowship hall. The reason we're doing the fellowship hall is because it's easier to clean. It's easier to practice social distancing in there. The chairs are all plastic and can be wiped down. And I mean, it's just, there's a lot of reasons. Traffic flow patterns will be easier to manage. So we will, we'll do that. There will be programming for kids birth through fifth grade, both Sunday and Wednesday. And then students will actually have their student hangout time on Wednesday nights at 6:30. So basically you show up, I'd come about 6:15. If you've got kids, get them checked in. Service will start at 6:30, and then on Sunday morning, same thing, except it starts at 10:30. That same service, so Wednesday night, the Wednesday night service will be the service that we record, and then that service will be aired through all of our digital platforms on Sunday mornings at 9. So if you're somebody who needs to continue to be safe at home, nothing changes for you. You can still log in all the ways you've logged in before, and you will see the service. The difference will be there will be a live studio audience there. So there will be, which will make it better, because honestly, like I do not like talking to a camera. Like, it's not my favorite thing. And so I much prefer to have people. So it will be better. And but we'll record it on Wednesday nights at 6:30. That's the service. Then we'll air at Sunday mornings at 9. And then the same service we'll do again live at 10:30. That's all we're doing on campus. So, so when we say Wednesday night, don't think about dinner or Awana or any of those things. It's two services, but they're going to be on Wednesday and Sunday. We'll have a lot of opportunity to really give a good, clean, strong, clean to the building afterwards, all the kids areas. We'll be doing all of that. And I'm just going to encourage, because I know, the 14, 15 of you guys watching right now are hardcore Southsiders. I'm telling Southsiders, if you can come on Wednesday, come on Wednesday. Because the space in the MFC, people have said, well, is it limited to 50? We're not under any obligation to limit the number to 50. We're just obligated to limit it to the number that we can use appropriate social distancing with. So depending on how many groups of families sit together or couples sit together, you can get 50 in the MFC if everybody's socially distant. But we know there will be people coming with families, and couples can sit together. So there's no RSVP. People have asked that. There's no RSVP. But we are asking folks who can come on Wednesday to come on Wednesday, because we'd like to make sure we've got plenty of space on Sunday. If we see that both services get maxed out, we'll go to a third service. But right now we just figured we'd start with 2 and kind of see how it goes from there. So that's a little bit about the services, and I'm really excited about it. And again, if you're sick, if you're running out of temperature, if you're coughing, if you're sneezing, please stay home. If you have, any of the at-risk factors that the CDC is saying, please consider continuing to worship online with us. So that's kind of where we are with the whole social distancing. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. There will be hand sanitizing stations around. We'll make sure to wipe everything down. But that's kind of where we are with the reopening. So we're excited to get started this week.
Yeah, and I know our only volunteer needs, Next Gen's covered completely. Our only volunteer needs that exist are people to help be ushers. And so So for those people, know that we'll ask you to wear a mask and to be safe and be precautious with other people. We're not mandating everybody who's in the building to wear a mask, but for our ushers, we want to make sure that we are wearing a mask and being safe with them. And so, if anybody's willing to help us to be ushers, be that guest service when people enter, it's not just beneficial on a guest service way of making a good first impression, it's beneficial on a safety way. The more ushers that we have, the safer we can be as a people, because then we're able to safely assign people or get people to the seats and have proper social distancing. So it really is a need that we have in our church right now, is to have guest service kind of ushers for that MFC room to get people to their seats. So
in fact, if you're willing to do it, you can just post on this thread and we'll contact you from there. Just, hey, I'll do guest services on Wednesdays, or I'll do it on Sundays. Let us know, and we'll get somebody in touch with you this week.
Yeah, we'd love to. And if you know anybody else, by all means, share this, talk to them. That's really our need. We're looking for about 3 people. So even just to put a number to it, we need about 3 people on each day. So that way we already have 3 kind of committed, but that's kind of bare minimum if we're just going to run with 3 guest service. Ideally, we would really need about 6 per event. And so please share the word, get that out there, and know that I think a misnomer is this perception that only young people are going to rush back, or only old people are going to rush back. Even when I'm talking to other churches in Jacksonville, it's a mix of both that are interested in coming back on campus. And for me to know that our house churches, I kind of did a tally around, we had about 40 people in house churches today. And so those things are going to go on, and we're looking to, honestly, that's been a trial period with house churches right now. We're going to officially be saying more and more about house churches, but if you're in a house church, keep going to the house church. And if you're interested in starting a house church, we're developing more and more resources for people to be able to get into the word, to be able to worship and have good fellowship in a properly social distanced way. So if you're interested in a house church, just by all means, reach out to us. We'd love to get with you and talk to you more about house churches. And the last big thing that I know of is for you guys, just if you have any children that are interested in camp, until tomorrow night at 12 o'clock, there is a code for 65% off for your children. And so it's Memorial One.
So that the children's camp, this is like $30 for 5 days of camp from 9 to 1 or 2 or 3. What time? I don't know what time.
Yeah, something like that. I haven't looked at it.
I mean, you can't, that's crazy.
Yeah.
So, and if you guys know people with kids at home and parents are trying to work, I mean, and the CDC just lifted restrictions on summer camps too. So, they're thinking it's safe and even beneficial for these kids to get out of the house some. So, moms and dads trying to get back to work, or essential workers going to the office, please, it's 2 o'clock. I think that was that you, or is that Megan?
That's Meg. That's our secret ghost in the system.
Thank you, Meg. So camp goes till 2. That's a good deal. So please share the word too. Post it everywhere on social media. Let's get this. We want to fill these camps up. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and that's children's. Unfortunately for the golf camp, it doesn't apply because it's a set rate for that. But Todd's doing a great job at making sure we're safe through this whole thing. So if you parents have any questions, by all means, reach out to Todd, and he'd be happy to take any questions about the precautions they're doing, about the steps they're doing for safety. Just reach out to Todd. He'd be happy to help you guys just to know what's going on. Any final thoughts, Gary? I know we want to kind of wrap it up. We want to thank you guys for joining us on a holiday weekend. We haven't always done these on holiday weekends. So thank you guys for sticking through and being with us for this. Any final thoughts, Gary?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everybody who's made this work. And I don't just mean people who are, the obvious folks who we all know are working so hard because we see their work maybe in the online service. They are certainly working hard. We appreciate them. But I just want to thank our deacons, our small group leaders. I want to thank, all the small group leaders who are calling their groups every day, and our prayer team who is praying from home and sharing prayer requests, across the phone and email, and using the post office to mail requests back and forth. And I mean, it's just amazing. The house church, these new house churches that we started, already up and running with 40. I mean, Southside has stepped up and proven itself to be a resilient church, and I am so incredibly grateful to this congregation and every person in it who's working so hard. If I started listing names, we'd go on and on and on. But people who are giving, thank you guys for giving. I mean, we've been able to help so many people. We have literally given away thousands of dollars since all this started, just helping folks in need. Our ministry partners, we've doubled down on giving to the International Mission Board. We've doubled down on giving to the North American Mission Board for church planting in North America and missions around the world. We've increased that. So thank you. We're trying to help our friends at One More Child or the Florida Baptist Children's Home. So we're collecting for them right now. If you could give to the Invested initiative, go online and give, just choose Invested. Anything you can give will help us, because we're trying to really pour some resources into the Florida Baptist Children's Home right now. If you could imagine running a children's home during a pandemic, these foster parents who've got extra kids in their houses that they've taken in. I mean, it's a big need. So we just appreciate so much everybody. This church congregation is incredibly generous. They're incredibly faithful. They're incredibly loving and courageous. And I couldn't be more grateful to be a part of this church.
And you guys stay safe on this Memorial Day weekend. And again, just thank you to all those. It was so cool. Our young adults, young professional group, it's officially, I think, young adult too, but the merchants wanted to set up tables just so people could have meals out in the square. And they were willing to pick up tables for 2 nights at this weekend. And one of them, I knew Casey and Molly would be out there, but then Connor Larkin, who's like a brand new member, we officially made him a member at our business meeting during COVID, was out there picking up tables and helping us out, and just had a good old time. And again, for our membership, it was just really cool to see them out there just having normal conversations with the people in the square. And that's, I was talking to some people and they're like, man, that's so cool that y'all are willing to help us and do that. And they would have never thought that the church would give resources like tables and chairs to these businesses using it in the square. And so just thank you guys for being willing even to help other organizations like the Merchants Association to do stuff like that. It's just, that's above and beyond. And it's so much that we couldn't do it if it was just pastoral staff. Going back to something Gary said, this is the church acting like the church. And so thank you guys for doing that, and have a safe couple days on Memorial Day weekend. And we will see you live on Wednesday, or we'll see you next week as well. Talk to you guys later. Bye.